Hi there, and welcome back to another edition of ScaleUp Radio, the podcast inspired by the Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System and designed to make navigating our scale-up journeys that little bit easier by learning from others' experiences. I'm Kevin Brent, and in today's episode, we're joined by Zahra Jawad, the CEO of Creasallis, pioneering biotech startup. Zahra shares her journey of developing innovative antibody solutions to enhance cancer treatments. And with over 18 years of experience in drug development, Zahra sheds light on the lengthy and costly process of bringing a drug to market, the importance of negotiation skills, and a critical role of building a skilled team. Make sure you don't miss any future episodes by subscribing to ScaleUp Radio wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. And you can also nominate a guest for ScaleUp Radio like Zahra if you know someone with an interesting scale-up story, and you can find out how in the show notes. For now, keep listening to learn about Creasallis' groundbreaking work in antibody engineering and Zahra's inspiring entrepreneurial path in a highly regulated and highly capital-intensive market. So let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of ScaleUp Radio. I'm delighted today to be joined by Zahra Jawad, who is the CEO and founder of Creasallis. So, Zahra, welcome to ScaleUp Radio.
Well, thank you for having me, Kevin.
It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to this one. So this is going to stretch my scientific knowledge, I think, this one. So tell us what Creasallis is about. And I suppose we should possibly start with the fact that it's not actually spelt in the way that we might expect Creasallis to be spelt.
No. So Creasallis, essentially we are a creative antibody solutions company, which is kind of what the company is short for. I felt at the time that we were making lots of great drugs, particularly antibody-based drugs for a number of therapy areas that are all being put to good use in the clinic. But they just needed a bit of creativity to be able to get more and leverage more out of them. And so that's where the idea of the company really started. It's about actually getting a bit more creative to leverage those drugs, to make good drugs into amazing drugs. And that was kind of the whole premise behind why I started the company and why it's called Creasallis and nothing else.
Brilliant. So you're working with product development companies, and you're helping them to be more creative, what sort of things would you actually be doing with them then?
So our sort of debut technology, I see the company as sort of a Pandora's box of lots of creative ideas to solve some of the biggest bottlenecks in therapies. And our first one is trying to get more antibody drug into a tumor. So you'd be really surprised to hear that actually, even though you've got these amazing drugs and we're curing a lot more people for cancer, it really is only about 0.01% of the drug that you actually inject into a patient actually makes it into the tumor.
Right.
And that means there's a lot of other drug going everywhere else. And that's why you see lots of side effects. Yeah. And that's why we find that some patients just can't tolerate drugs anymore. So that's the first problem we're trying to tackle, where we have a really creative solution where we just modify the antibody slightly. And with that, we're able to see more drug being taken up specifically into a tumor rather than anywhere else in any other tissue.
Right. So does that mean then that you can work with multiple different types of therapies that are targeting different types of cancer cells?
Yes. So as long as it's an antibody, it's our best friend, and we can modify any antibody in the oncology space for that. So yes, you're right. We have the opportunity to modify other people's drugs and improve them, but we've also got a really novel window where we can actually make super powerful drugs from the get-go. And really that's where we want to focus most of our energy on, because that's really the skill set of the team. We are drug developers. The team has been working in this space for the last 20 years. And so we know how to make drugs really well, and it would be a shame to just have a technology and ship it out. We'd much rather be making our own drugs, especially in places where drugs have failed and so people have neglected them, or the targets haven't been so great because they were too toxic for patients. We feel that we can really pick those up and make some novel therapeutics that were not been made before.
Okay, so this sounds like a really expensive avenue to try and set up, or business to set up. We hear about the enormous amounts of money that pharmaceutical companies spend on research and development. We hear about biotech companies and the huge investments that get raised and put into some of these companies. So how have you managed to go about setting up a business in this space, as you called it?
Yes, it's a very capital intensive company. And actually for the first 10 to 15 years, we've been not making any money at all. We'll just be trying to get the drugs through the clinical trials. And that's the nature of the game when it comes to drug discovery. It's a very long process, mostly because of the regulatory requirements. Yeah. You've got to prove a lot of things before you're allowed to inject a drug into a human. And even then, for cancer, our readouts really are, is the patient going to survive or not? And sometimes those timelines are quite long to wait for them to survive or not. So essentially, when I got started with the company, I had this idea of how to improve how antibodies can penetrate tumors. And being a woman, I probably talked myself out of it about a dozen times. Right. And thought, it's a rubbish idea. No one's going to believe this. And then a friend, it was lockdown, and a friend of mine said, well, why don't you just enter a competition and just see if someone would give you some feedback? And I'm like, good idea, feedback. I mean, that's what I need. It's just an idea of how to get started. Where can I get that first bit of capital from to start the company? Because I do need quite a bit of it. Entered the competition and I won. Wow. And I won a place at an accelerator based at Babraham Research Campus, which is just south of Cambridge. And they gave me a little bit of money, only £10,000, but like a whole crash course on how to start a company. Yep. From everything from opening a bank account to how to find investment and how to pitch for that investment and who are the investors to go for and what accounting looks like and how to hire the right people. And I learned and soaked that all up for about a year. And during that time, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to see if I can find some investors who can, come on my journey with me. Let me start at the top. Let's go to the top investors there are around. And I pitched to the investors. And I was really lucky. I think 2 investors came forward with some term sheets, just with an initial capital for us to get started. And so I just took one of those offers. And that's how I got the little bit of money in to get in initially, to get the experiments up and started. You've got to be really careful because it's really easy to spend a lot of money in science. Equipment can cost hundreds of thousands. Just kitting out a lab for the basic equipment, we're talking about several million that we need. And so I needed to be super careful that I didn't just spend all the money on fancy equipment, which was very tempting. So I hired a space in a communal lab. So it was a bench I had. The lab was full of equipment that was all taken care of by Babraham at the time, Babraham Research Campus. It's called the Live Lab area. It's there special for startups. Okay. And we're all different companies. All of us are literally 1 or 2 people big. And we're all desperate to get that first bit of data to show that maybe our wacky ideas work. And that's where I spent the first year, with my head down in the lab, really trying to deliver on all the promises I promised those investors who took a massive leap of faith and invested in me, and with my little idea of how to improve drugs for cancer.
And were they investing with a certain amount of money with a specific milestone in mind?
Yes, definitely specific milestones. So that's the key thing for any sort of founder. When you give that initial, especially the first investors you get on, you're going to give them, they're going to want to see some milestones, and you're going to make some promises, and you must adhere to those promises. You've got to start building a relationship of trust. And I've always been very formidable and known in the lab to deliver on my promises. And this was my time to show it all over again, but now with a new audience, not my bosses or my peers. These are people who had no idea who I was, and I had to prove myself all over again, which is hard actually when you're so experienced and you're having to face a different audience, who you need to prove yourself to when you know that you can do the job anyway. but not a problem. I'm not fazed by that. I'm happy to meet a deadline. And I hired one other person with me so that the two of us were able to deliver all the lab work. Her skill set is completely complementary to mine. So all the things I thought I was the weakest at in the lab, I brought her in to kind of where I knew it was completely her strength. So it was I really knew what I was good at and what I wasn't. And I brought those people in really who complement my skills.
Very good. So what milestones did you have to achieve then in that first year that you were talking about?
Yeah, so I promised the investors I'd go for, so I had absolutely nothing at the beginning. I just had an idea. It was just me. I had no data. I had no patent. So I promised that I'd file a patent, which is easy enough. Okay. But then I promised that I would get to prove in mouse that my modifications to an antibody can improve how much they penetrate solid tumors, going head to head with a normal mAb and then our modified. A mAb is a monoclonal antibody or an antibody, and our modified antibody. I promised them 16 months that we'd get to that timeline, but me and my colleague, we were like super organized. We worked really well together. We achieved everything in just over 11 months. And we got to that sort of mouse data that we needed to kind of prove that the idea worked.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And that's the milestone that we met. And we filed, and all that data then went into our patent. So the patent was filed as well to kind of protect, which is really important in life sciences. You always need to have some sort of patent protection of the idea.
Great. Fantastic. So you got the protection, you've proved that your particular way of adapting the antibodies works. And is this something to do with, for the non-scientific people, including me, that might be listening to this, is something to do with the size of the molecules and how they can penetrate the tumors?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult when you try to modify the size of molecules, and that's what people really have been trying to do in the past, making them smaller so that they can penetrate deeper. But then we've got a real problem, and that's called the kidney. And in the kidney, there's a filter, and anything small will just get filtered out into urine really rapidly. Right. So there's always a balance when you're making a drug between how long you can keep the drug in the blood versus how quickly is it eliminated. And then that kind of determines how often you need to give it to the patient. And all of these things are really important. And that balance is really important to maintain. And it's been one of the biggest dogmas that we face. So we can't play with the size very much, because we know that if we get it too small to the favorable conditions that you would want to see things getting into tumors, you would have to literally hook up a patient 24/7 to an IV drip, which is not nice for them. And that's not really, in our eyes, a viable drug. So you've got to play pretty clever tricks of what the tumor really is all about. And kind of imagine yourself that you're a drug going through the bloodstream, and what are the obstacles that you're going to face, and see if you can find some creative ways to get through those obstacles that maybe people haven't put those two things together before.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And then, they're essentially going around the blood, and they're programmed in a way to latch on to the particular cancer cells that we want, the tumors that we want to target. Yeah. And then because of what you've done to modify them, much more of the drug actually then gets absorbed into the tumor.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Really good. So you managed, and we should say that, of course, you didn't just enter this competition with an idea having come from a completely different background. Tell us about your background before. It's not as if you're brand new to research and development.
No, I'm not. So I've spent the last 18 years actually working in research and development in a number of biotech and pharma, companies, all in the sort of Cambridge area. And that's really a big hub for antibody engineering. So one of the first antibody companies opened up in Cambridge, which was Cambridge Antibody Technology, from the technology that came out of Sir Professor Greg Winter's lab, and that was based at the LMB in Cambridge. So Cambridge became a hub for antibody engineering companies, and a lot of the some amazing drugs came out of both Cambridge Antibody Technology and other companies moving forward. So I was, after sort of finishing my PhD and doing my first few postdocs, I entered as a scientist into an antibody engineering company. And the first job I had, where I just put my head down and tried to learn as much as possible about what it is to make a drug. And it's a very complicated, multifaceted process. It's not straightforward at all. We did think in the early days, all we needed was a really good binder to a target, and then you're off. But actually, you've got to be able to make it, and a patient has to tolerate it, and it has to distribute really well, and it has to be formulated in a way. So I learned all these things, and I spent sort of 8.5 years at GSK learning how to make drugs. Okay. I then moved on to other smaller biotechs, and really my speciality became early R&D. And the best way to describe it is going from chaos to candidate, going from the really early stages of research where everyone's like, we need to find a drug for this target and we don't know what, to really produce that one stellar drug, the best that we could have found, that goes forward into man. And I've worked on a number of different programs. I've worked in a number of different therapy areas, not just cancer. Started my career in inflammation and stem cells and arthritis, moving into really cancer in the last 5 to 6 years.
Fantastic. And can you give, because there's lots of entrepreneurs listening. Probably only a few of them will have an understanding of the process that it takes to bring to find a product, find that candidate out of all the chaos that you mentioned, and then to be able to bring it to market, get through all the regulatory hoops and hurdles that we have to. Can you give us a very brief outline of how that process works and some of the key challenges and how long it takes as well for those people listening?
Yeah, so I guess it's all a numbers game in my mind. You've got to start with a large number of possible candidates. The larger, the better. And to get it down to that best one, there's no point in starting with 3 because there's so many different parameters that you've got to look at. They're going to all fall foul. So when you start your first sort of drug candidates, we use a technique where we kind of randomly look at different antibody sequences that have been mutagenicized, and we kind of narrow it down maybe to the top several hundred. So first you look at the first maybe 200 or 300 antibodies that come out that maybe look like they might be binding the target that you want. And then does it actually do the biology you need it to do? And you first look at like the protein on the protein level, then you look at a cell. Maybe you take a patient cell that's that you've taken, and you can look in more detail. Does it actually functionally block the growth of the cancer, for example, in cancer? But you've got to have a really good indication at the beginning of the project. What is it you're looking for? Once you've worked all that out, there's another thing, another big part of making a drug is, can you make it? And can you make it to scale? And so therefore, when you make like a protein-based drug, like an antibody, it's got to be made at like kilogram levels for clinical trials. You want to make one batch that will be able to serve those 100 or 200 patients. Otherwise, you've got to go back and prove that every batch has got to be identical. So there's all these parameters, quality control, so you've got to try all of this in the lab. So going from sort of the chaos to the candidate part, I would say for a brand new drug, it probably takes about 2 to 3 years to tick all those boxes. You want to be in a really easy position at the end where you think, actually, I've got 5 really good drugs here. I'm going to be really picky and pick the best one out of those 5. Often it's more like, we've got maybe 2 drugs at the end.
And this is largely, this first stage is in the lab, as you say, in the test tube or in the petri dishes or whatever, and we're looking at it at a cellular type level as to what happens there. And then there's a stage, isn't there, when once we've narrowed that down, where we then start to test it in mice. You mentioned mice earlier on, or
Yeah, mice would be really the go-to for many projects, depending on what the again, it's all about what drug are you making. You've got to know that right at the beginning of the program. And if mouse is the right model, or the rat is a better model, or maybe neither are suitable. And now we're more and more moving towards making artificial organs out of human cells and organoids as ways of proving that drugs work. And getting through that process and getting down to your final candidate is a multifaceted effort by many different types of groups. It's not just one or two people. We're talking about a team of 20 or 30 people getting to that final decision of whether this is good enough. The next stage then is you file your sort of regulatory filing. The regulatory bodies want to know that what you've made is safe. That's the most important thing. You've got to prove that. And once you've proven that it's safe and they're okay with the data and they think that there might be something there that is different enough from what's out there that might really help patients, then you'll get the okay to go into phase 1 clinical trials. Usually the phase 1 clinical trials is really just proving it's safe in humans because you've never put it into a human before. Depending on the study and how you've designed it, it could be on healthy patients or even diseased patients. And then the second phase 2 clinical trials really is about, does it do what you think it's going to do? And those phases will last you. It's that what takes the biggest chunk of both money, capital, and time. We're talking about maybe 5 to 10 years of when a molecule hits phase 1 clinical trials to get to market after that, depending again on the disease that you're going after, how desperate are people for a therapy in that disease, and what the regulators tell you you're allowed and not allowed to do.
So you can get fast tracked if it's recognised that it's.
It can get So there are like orphan diseases, genetic diseases, like in gene therapies, where people have absolutely no hope. And so those gene therapies, maybe there might not be many patients, but they may allow them to enter the clinical trials earlier and benefit.
So you've got a hugely expensive and lengthy period of time. You've had to file your patent very early on in this process to make sure you're protected. And your patent has a specific life. What is it, 17 years, something?
25 years.
25 years, okay. So it's a bit longer than I thought it was. But you've got 25 years and you've already just talked away 10 easily in the development.
If not 15,
Not 15.
So that's the dilemma that all pharma companies and biotechs face, is that when their product gets onto the market, they've only maybe got 10 years of sales before the patent expires. And then there are, trust me, a dozen other companies hot on your tail wanting to make exactly what you make when the patent expires. And so there's a real, that's why maybe the pricing is as bad as it is, because they've got to recoup that cost really in the 10 years of sales that they've got to make up for that.
And you mentioned you go from chaos to candidate, and you've obviously got a huge drop-off rate of candidates there that don't even make it to the candidate stage. But even those candidates, then there's significant drop-offs, obviously, throughout the rest of the clinical trial process, isn't there? So to end up with one product at the end that actually you can bring to market has taken an awful lot of trial and error and failures along the way.
Yeah, but they say it's about $1 billion to get one drug to market, with all the failures that come along with it. And so you've got to be ready for that long game as an entrepreneur if you're in life sciences, for a very capital intensive long game where you're committed to seeing your molecule through all the way to the end.
So how are you going to make that work then for you, for Creasallis? How are you going to make a company that is going to be able to pay back and actually be able to continue? Because as you've already hinted, you're going to have to keep getting investment to get through various milestones. So how are you going to do that? And what made you want to do that? Because I guess there's a lot of risk on your shoulders, a lot of stress, no doubt, that brings.
It is, but it's my game. It's what I've been trained to do, right, from my PhD onwards. So it's the world I'm in and the world I understand the best. So I find it more stressful for those who produce products who are trying to sell to customers than what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of options, right? We'll have a pipeline of molecules that will go through not just one drug. So we don't lay our bets on one drug. Yeah. We'll have several going through. And some of these may be interesting to other companies. So there are always opportunities in a sort of life sciences setting for you to partner with other people to raise capital that way, or co-develop things with other bigger companies who are interested in your disease area or with your asset. There's also the option of out-licensing our IP. If people really are like, oh, we've got a toxic drug and we'd love to get more of it into a tumor, then that's also an option to raise capital as well. And I think most companies would do a bit of both, try to develop their own portfolio and still rely on investment, or look to IPO as quickly as possible to try and generate revenue through the stock market, but also do deals with other companies to be able to bring in sort of modest amounts of revenue to support the R&D platform.
Great. So you mentioned that you'd got to the stage where you'd proven your first milestones with the investors. What's next? What's happening now?
Yep. So we're just about to finish raising our next financial round with investors. We need to shape the company to look more like a biotech. So we need now a portfolio of drugs, not just one drug. It's not just an idea anymore. We've got to make drugs that are really important in disease areas that are really unmet. Yeah. And that's what we need to shape right now. We need to grow the team and bring on the skills that we need to complement our team. So hiring the right people, bringing them on board is really important for us at the moment. And filing more IP. I mean, we are supposed to be a creative solutions company. So the kinds of brains we're bringing on are those who are a little bit more creative and who want to have simple solutions to alleviate some of the biggest bottlenecks in drug discovery. And so using that to build on our technology really is quite important in the next stage too.
Great. So what have you learned? What surprised you the most in moving out of the lab or a biotech or a pharma company and running your own? And what have you learned maybe about raising the money in the capital markets and how all of that works?
Yeah. So the first thing I learned is that I'm unusual. Okay. Those who come from the pharma and biotech industry, we all have very comfortable, high-paying, permanent jobs, and finding people who are willing to take that risk to leave their jobs and start a startup is rare, and that gets you noticed. So that's the first thing I learned, is that move in itself was enough to intrigue a lot of investors of why has she done that? Why has she left her great job to do something like that? What's driving her? What I've learned about investment in general is that you've got to be confident in that there's money there that needs to be deployed and needs to be invested in great ideas. And you are a great idea. So don't feel like you're having to scrimp for pennies. Go in and be bold. That actually, especially if you've come from a background like myself, you know what you're doing. You've developed drugs before. Go in and ask for the capital you realistically need to move it forward. And the third thing I've learned is negotiate on everything, because that's really the key of being an entrepreneur. So even when you're at Sainsbury's, haggle for that leg of lamb at the till. But I think that's just haggle for everything, because it will become really important whether you're negotiating with a pharma company over your technology in the future, or whether you're haggling with an investor, whether you're trying to get a supplier to cut down on their costs. It's the key, I think, to entrepreneurship. And so make that part of your life, that you're haggling all the time and negotiating, whether it be with your children, with your spouses, with your friends. But practice as much as possible. That's my top tip.
Very good. I love it. And I think there's lots of examples that we could probably pull on how important it is to essentially get that negotiation right. Often the money is made in the purchase, not in the sale of things, isn't it? For example, if you can buy at the right price, then that gives you a much better chance of being able to sell at a price that you'll make and make some money. But yes, just not taking the first offer that's on the table because it looks good. It's easy, isn't it? When we've somebody's going to invest and we go, yeah, that looks like that's great. Okay, thank you very much. Whereas actually there may be more on the table, or there may be something better around the corner.
And different people need different styles of negotiation. You'll learn that quite quickly. It's not okay always to go in quite aggressively. Sometimes you need to use different methods to try and negotiate and get a deal out. Flattery to you getting stroppy and getting aggressive. There's a whole range of different styles, and the more you practice, the more you get to realize what really works on different people and what doesn't.
What would you say sort of the sort of things that you found to work for you?
I mean, I'm a very open and collaborative person. So I am always going to push a little bit further. So you've got to agree on a price that you think is a fair price. And then you've got to agree on a price that you think I'm never going to go over that. And you just go in really low. And then I use flattery quite a lot. I'm giving away all my secets now.
Yes,
everybody who's going to negotiate with me can see right through me.
I'm sure they won't be listening.
Yeah. So I like to sort of, try to highlight the benefits to both of us and use that as a negotiator. I'm not one to get aggressive and put my foot down, usually, not unless I really have to.
So just give us an insight, I'm not necessarily after specific numbers, but how on earth do you go about valuing somebody's investment? So I can see how you could put together your plan as to how much money you might need to get to that milestone, for example, if we go back to your first investor. But how on earth do you value the business for their investment as to therefore what proportion of the business they get for their investment, or however you might take it? So how what did you learn about that aspect?
Yeah,
that must all have been new to you.
I think it's down to three main factors that I could be wrong, and I'm still learning the game. But I think so the patents that you have adds value to your company. That improves your valuation. So that's something that's key. The data, the higher this sort of species you go into, the more your value. So if you're in cells, it's quite low. If you're going into mice, it's a bit higher. But if you're in human, it's even higher then. And then I guess it's like about the market and what similar drugs are out there. And I think that people use that, and how many then assets you have in your portfolio, and how many potential drugs you can make out of that. And if we assume maybe 1 out of 4 of your programs will make it all the way, what the value of something like that would be. And, there's some great examples of antibody-based drugs in oncology. The biggest seller of last year was pembrolizumab or Keytruda, which profited at 25 billion for Merck last year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of antibodies on that scale, and the $1 billion that are selling for billions of dollars every year. And so you can kind of compare what you're doing to that. Is it better? Is it worse? Is it on the same? Can you take a slice of that market as well? And I think those are all the indicators of your valuation. You kind of, again, you have to just push and negotiate on the value. You're going to see yourself as a very valuable commodity. Your investors are always going to see all the risks, and it's a matter of finding that good medium.
Great. So you're demonstrating to them what the commercial opportunity might be, and you can use comparators along the way. And as you say, how you compare with them at the stage that you're at now, and what the opportunity might be when you find that one candidate, or with all the licensing opportunities and things that you might have for several.
Yeah, there's also a lot of mid-sized biotechs that get acquired, many that get acquired, because and we're seeing that's always a busy sphere in life sciences of acquisitions, and because they've got technology or a patent and a company wants to have a monopoly over that. So big pharma companies often buy companies, and then you can use that as well as a benchmark, like a similar company to ours that has antibody engineering capabilities, had X number of assets in its portfolio, got acquired for 1 billion, 1.2 billion. You can use that, and you know what phase they got to when they got acquired as well. So you can use that as well as an indicator of where the market is, and accounting for inflation, recession, markets being up, markets being down at the time that you're looking.
Very good. So you managed to find your first investor relatively quickly, by the sounds of it, from what you were saying. What do you think were some of the factors that led them to believe in you right from the start?
I think it's my background.
Yeah.
And the references. So that was so important. I think it was the people. It was a support network. There's the people that I'd worked for before, people was working for currently, who put in a good word for me. So don't ever burn bridges when you leave any job, is my sort of key thing. You just don't know. In life sciences in particular, it's a very, very small world. And I think, a few people said, never underestimate Zahra. And, she'll deliver what she says she will. And I think the investors were like, okay, we'll take it. It was a good bet. I mean, you're investing in someone who developed drugs before, who's got a lot of experience. It wasn't a silly investment. If they could. I felt like they could, if they were cornered and why it failed. So actually, we made a good decision on paper on someone that looked quite credible at the time. So you've got to go in with that confidence of knowing that you're credible and that you've got a good story and that you know that you're going to deliver what you've promised on. And I think if you come in with that confidence, it makes a big difference to get that investment quickly. If you go in and you're like, oh, just like I know I've got an idea, but I just need a few like 100,000 to get me off the blocks, knowing that you're going to have to be fundraising again a month later because it's not enough to see you through any good length of time, then, they'll smell the fear as well, and the uncertainty in yourself. So you've got to have that confidence, firstly, that you know what you're doing and that you're confident it's going to work.
Great. So you mentioned that part of this next round is to start developing out the team. So what are the key sort of roles that you need to fill for the next stage of your development?
Well, definitely, like the core, my belief is that the core of the IP and the ability to generate more IP has to be internalized. So for me, it's the scientists that are the most valued commodity that we have, those with the creative and with the magic green fingers that can get things done in the lab. So really, my aim is to create an organization where we can do it with the least number of people possible, rather than scaling massively and getting out of control. We outsource as much of our sort of support functions as possible so that we don't have to do them internally, and we focus our FTE headcount really on the key people that can either execute on the IP or generate further IP to kind of build that value internally for the company.
Excellent. And what role does technology play in the business? Yeah,
so like this whole game of like numbers in drug discovery, it's been more and more possible because of robotics and automation, being able to miniaturize what we do so that instead of just looking at maybe a dozen tubes on my bench, I can now look at a dozen plates on my bench, and each plate holds 100 samples. And now they can hold 380 samples. Some of them can hold even more. So miniaturizing equipment that's now more sensitive is enabling us to be able to get to that numbers game better, so that when we get to that final candidate, we are in a position of luxury of choosing from one of the top 20 best drugs rather than the top 2, how it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. So being abreast of all that technology and understanding where it plays to the strengths of our organization is really key. It's also quite expensive to get these robotics in. It's, if you don't have, with miniaturization, if you don't have robotics supporting it, it's very tiresome for scientists to be able to do experiments in such a small scale.
Yeah.
And that comes with a cost, and it also comes with an expertise. So you do need programmers who can program these machines to automate the processes. AI, machine learning is playing a really big role in drug discovery and helping come up with, because we're miniaturizing and we're coming up with a lot more data. That data needs to be managed, it needs to be sorted, sense needs to be made out of it. And that's where machine learning and AI comes in to kind of help make those decisions without human intervention and being able to see patterns that we would normally miss as well.
Very good. So what is it you love most about what you do? You clearly, I mean, your eyes light up when you start to talk about, answer some of my questions when we talk about, what is it that you love most about what you're doing?
Well, actually, cut me open, and I'm a scientist. That's what I've been trained to do. Yeah. And there is no other magic in the world than taking a clear bit of liquid, which is microliters in volume, adding it to another microliter of something that you can't see, and it becomes a drug. It's just magic on a different level that I don't experience in any other part of my life, apart from being in the lab and actually seeing all that come together. So, it all makes logical sense, science. And when experiments don't work, it's for a good reason, and getting to the bottom of that and understanding why. And when you do think it will work, it will, because it's a very logical process to it. It just needs a lot of patience, and there's just nothing quite like being at the forefront of research and with a purpose that it will do something good for humanity in the long run.
Fantastic. And what is the legacy that you want to be able to leave with Creasallis?
I want to lead with a view that there are creative ways to overcome some of the bottlenecks that we're currently facing in drug discovery. I want to leave with that legacy that we can run organizations more efficiently than we have been, with a great culture as well. So that's really important to me too, as a leader of the company, that everybody feels so it's an open, transparent culture where we are able to rapidly make decisions. And that's why I want to purposefully keep the team small. And that's why we're able to do so much in the short period of time we've been up and running. I want to leave a legacy of it's possible to think out of the box. And there's a space for creative minds in science as well. Brilliant.
Good. And if we're meeting again in 5 years' time, Zahra, what would you count as success?
We're about to inject a human with a Creasallis antibody. That would be my dream in 5 years' time, to have had that approval, and that we're on that track to deliver that. That would be a huge success.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, I mean, I've learned a lot. You've challenged me, but it's been absolutely fascinating. Are you all right for a couple of quick fire questions before we close?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, sure.
So if you could go back to your younger self, what advice would you give the young Zahra?
There's going to be a lot of people who believe in you when you didn't believe in yourself. Always keep those people close. Those people are valuable in shaping you and seeing something in you that you don't see in yourself. So Keep those people close.
Excellent. Love it. Good. Any books, podcasts, or other learning resources that you would recommend to other entrepreneurs?
Well, I like the book Crucial Conversations. Having conversation, I think it's all about communication when you're an entrepreneur, how you communicate with your team, investors, society. You have to get that messaging right. You can't just say the first thing that comes to your head. This is a has to be a well thought out process when you're wanting to appraise people positively or negatively, when you want to fire and hire positively, negatively. It's a crucial conversation that needs to be well thought out. You've got to understand your audience and you've got to understand how to give them that message. So I feel that that's quite a strong book that I actually not just use in my business, but use in my life and communicating with family and friends as well. From an organizational perspective, I love Brave New Work, the opportunity to break down barriers and rechange the way management is run. And I'd love to explore some of these ideas within Creasallis as well, to see how far we can push that within the life science sector.
Very good. Excellent. And are there any apps or bits of tech that you use all the time?
What, in Creasallis as our job?
Well, I'm thinking that you might be able to recommend to other entrepreneurs, so any apps or bits of tech that you.
I use Feedly quite a lot to get all the latest news. So Feedly, you can do, so I get like feeds in for antibody engineering, maybe drugs and oncology, but also business and things of interest to me. So it filters out the internet and gives you sort of a digest every day of what's interesting. I think it's important to read around. I still get a lot of information out of LinkedIn, actually, especially by following other entrepreneurs.
Very good.
Yeah, I'm not a big app person apart from that.
No. Good. And who would you say has had the most influence on you as an entrepreneur or as a business leader?
Can't say there's one person. I think it's an amalgamation of many different people. From my father, who, pushed the girls and his daughters all for education and to be the best versions of themselves. And, so that was one big inspiration for me. Two colleagues, bosses I've had who have been absolutely outstanding in how they've led. Other female entrepreneurs that I've worked with who've been so generous with their thoughts, with their thinking, not just females, male as well. So there's a whole mishmash of people. I can't say one person is someone I admire and look up to. I think my take is I take a little bit of what I like from different kinds of people around me, and I form an imaginary friend, which I call my entrepreneurial support network.
your ESN. Good. All right, excellent. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating, Zahra. Thank you very much. If people would like to reach out to you or find out more about Creasallis, what's the best ways for them to do that?
Yep. So definitely reach out to our website. You can see me there. I am the fire starter. That's a name. That's my title, my job title on our website. You can contact me through the website or LinkedIn. I'm actually quite active on, so you can reach out there if you want to find out more as well. I'm happy. And we have a LinkedIn page. So please follow us on LinkedIn, and then you'll get all the latest thoughts and data that's coming through the company there.
Fantastic. Super. Zahra Jawad, thank you very much indeed for being my guest on ScaleUp Radio today.
Thank you very much for having me, Kevin.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial ScaleUp System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.